Huckabee Theater in Hendersonville, Tennessee, just outside of Nashville, where we do the Huckabee Show every week. And one of the people responsible for helping put that together is Pam Case, our senior producer. She joins me, as she always does, on our Fridays so that we can do our live stream. What we're looking for, though, are your questions, because we're going to get to as many as we can. You can send your questions in the chat or send a super chat. You get more visibility that way. Our moderators are watching the chat for your questions. Of course, this is a good time to remind you that if you haven't already, right now, I mean like right now, is a good time to subscribe to this channel. Hit the notification bell and be sure to leave us a comment, a like, and share this video with all your friends. And make sure that they are aware that we are live streaming right now. Now, our favorite comment from last week, because we love the comments and we even look at those that come after we finish the live stream. This one comes from Charlie. Here's what Charlie said. And I trust that this is a female Charlie because it's spelled with the I at the end. So I'm going to make that assumption there.
Okay.
But these days, what does it matter, right? But anyway, Charlie is brilliant. Here's what she says. Thanks for the passage of time. That was a memorable passage and one to be enjoyed as it passes. You're very welcome, Charlie. And just like Kamala, we are painfully aware of the passage of time, especially when she or Biden are talking. You had to have been here last week to probably fully get that, but it was a memorable stroll down memory lane and along the passage of time. Now, before we get started, here's a question for you. We hope you'll weigh in on it during the course of the live stream. Do you blame Vladimir Putin or Joe Biden for high energy cost? Who's really to blame? Joe Biden says it's Putin's fault. Many of us are not sure about that. What is your thought? Leave your answers in the chat. Or if you're watching this after the stream is over, leave your answers in the comment section below. We've got a lot of clips today that we're going to roll with to give you a little framework of what's going on. Something that is brand new. The media is finally, after all this time, paying attention to the Hunter Biden laptop story, and it is a huge story. Now, I wish they'd have paid attention to it in October of 2020, just before the election, because it very well could have moved the election differently. But at least, even the mainstream media, you may remember, they all said that this was unverified, that it was Russia disinformation. Many of the people in the intel community, mostly former intel people that had worked for either Bush or Obama, all said it was disinformation, that there was no evidence that it was true. Well, now they've all admitted, even down to the Washington Post and the New York Times and NBC, that yes, it is authentic, the Hunter Biden laptop. Here, for example, is NBC, of all people. It almost gave me a cardiac moment. But watch this.
Accounts linked to Biden also received nearly $4 million in consulting contracts from a Chinese energy company, according to an analysis by the Washington Post. But during the campaign, then candidate Biden denied there was a China connection.
My son has not made money in terms of this thing about, what are you talking about, China?
Yeah, what are you talking you know, that little country, oh, it's China. Yeah, we heard of them somewhere along the way. I mean, this is amazing, but Joe Biden vigorously throughout the campaign of 2020 denied that his son Hunter had anything to do with China, even though, think about this, Hunter Biden flew on Air Force Two with his pop, the then vice president, to, get ready for it, China. China. What did he go for? Because he wanted a fortune cookie? Give me a break, people. This is a guy who's catching a ride to China on Air Force Two, showing up like he's an official somebody, connected to his dad, or as he's referred to in Hunter's emails, the big guy who gets a 10% cut of the deals they make. And listen, this story is far from over. Let's just hope the media is so overwhelmed with truth that they cannot keep ignoring the story. Now, when asked about it at the White House podium, the communications director, and she was handling the podium that day because both the press secretary and the assistant press secretary had been tested positive for COVID. So they basically went down the hall and said, hey, you're up today. You're going to the podium. So the communications director, Bedingfield, had this to say when asked about whether Hunter was kind of on his father's radar screen. Let's watch.
Following up on Kristen's line of inquiry as well, I know Hunter Biden is not a government employee. You don't speak for him. Has the president read these reports? Do you guys take them to him when the inquiries come in? And what has been his reaction to them?
I don't have anything additional to add on this from the podium, but thank you. Caitlin?
Yeah, I don't have anything to add. Not that I'm going to answer the question, because she absolutely did not, but I don't have anything to add on this. Next, as quickly as she could. That was as fast a turn, I think, as I've ever seen.
She didn't lie.
Well, she didn't lie. No,
So
she didn't. She just said she didn't have anything to add. You know, that's like saying, did you murder this guy? He's laying here, you have a knife in your hand, got blood all over you, and this guy's bleeding from a stab wound. Did you do it? I got nothing to add. Nothing to add whatsoever. And that's basically how that went down. Well, this has also been a week in which it's really, I think, getting out of hand. And one of the reasons we asked the question at the beginning, and we hope that you'll give us a comment, your thoughts, is Putin or Biden responsible for the high energy cost, is because Joe Biden continues to want to blame everyone but himself for the fact that people are paying in places like California over $6 a gallon for gasoline. Now, when Biden was this week announcing some new restrictions on the energy production, he basically said, hey, there's no reason we're not producing more oil and gas. Let's watch.
It's also a moment of patriotism. I want to acknowledge those companies that have already announced they're increasing immediate production. They're investing money to produce more oil and also clean technology we need to reduce our dependence on oil in the future. They have everything they need, nothing standing in their way. And they've indicated they will be producing an extra 1 million barrels of oil per day.
Well, he says nothing is standing in the way. Actually, there is something standing in the way. And President Biden, if you go look in the mirror, you'd find out what it is. Because you declared war on the oil and gas industry. You did that from the very beginning of your administration, but quite frankly, let's roll the tape back. You were saying this throughout the campaign. People didn't believe you were serious, but by golly, turns out you were. You repeatedly said there will be no fossil fuels, and I think you gave the date by 2025 or some ridiculous, impossible goal like that. But heck, you're on your way. And so it shouldn't be a big shock, but now he wants to blame the energy companies and say, well, it's their fault. They're not patriotic enough. No, it has nothing to do with patriotism. It has to do with good business sense. They have shareholders. If they do stupid things, ultimately, your agency, I don't know if you know this, President Biden, but did you know there's an agency that oversees the stocks of companies and how they're worked? And if a company does really stupid things, they can get in trouble with the Securities and Exchange Commission, one of your agencies. So they can't do things that would be reckless. Then they'd run afoul of the SEC, so they're not going to do that. You know what would be reckless? To invest billions of dollars in exploration without any semblance of guarantee that the government isn't going to shut down that exploration after they're well into their investment, too late to turn back, yet now in an investment that they can't make any money off of. Businesses don't do things to see if they can lose money. That's called gambling, and that's what happens when people go to Vegas and sit at the slot machines. They pretty well, most of them know they're going to lose money, but they think there's a chance they might. Can I just tell you that businesses aren't as stupid as Joe Biden must think they are? So that's just not going to happen. CNBC, which is their business network, their Brian Sullivan also talked about this nonsense where the Biden administration says, we've got 9,000 oil and gas leases out there that they could use. And he points out how that is totally irrelevant to really getting energy production going. Let's watch.
I would say, and I've had many private conversations with these executives, whatever you think of the industry, Kelly, they're human beings. They're just blood pumping like the rest of us. And they're like, we're confused. The messages are all mixed. The signals are mixed. And by the way, those federal leases, a lot of them are offshore, and you only drill on certain tracks. So that 9,000 permits thing is It's kind of like saying, why haven't you used all of your yard to build a house on every inch?
It's a good analogy, actually, and it's exactly right. So the misinformation that we're getting is largely coming out of the Biden White House that takes us for students who thinks that we don't understand the big picture of the oil and gas industry. And frankly, it's a competitive industry. You can say, well, those people are making too much money. They can't make too much money because if they do, their competitor will put them out of business. That's how it works. Somebody is going to produce it. There's a fixed cost in doing that. How much profit they make depends on a lot of factors. The cost of getting the fuel to the consumer, shut a pipeline down, and guess what? It's going to cost more to get it to you. So when Joe Biden killed the Keystone XL pipeline and said we're going to have to ship it above ground on trains owned by Warren Buffett, his big donor and friend, oh, I'm sure there's no connection there. It costs more to bring that crude oil to the refineries all the way at the Gulf Coast and then distribute it out. So yes, policies matter, and they matter a whole lot. Pam, I bet we're getting some questions. Surely we are.
We are, and we're getting some great response also to the question that you posed at the beginning of our broadcast today. Do you blame Putin or Biden for high energy costs? 315 votes, and it's Biden's fault, 92% of those that polled, and both at fault, 6%. Okay. So that's where we are at this point.
And 2%, they haven't a clue. Or maybe they say it's Putin. Okay.
Absolutely. Going to take a journey down a different path with Stephanie Ellis. Because of her super chat contribution this afternoon. Would the far left be interested in diluting, overruling parents' right to homeschool, or at least force us to teach their liberal junk? Could they be successful?
They could. That's a great question, Stephanie, and I appreciate your asking, because in many states, the State Board of Education does in fact regulate, at least to some degree, homeschool. And it's a big debate in states. And when I was governor, it was one of the big kind of points of argument. There were many of the educrats, people who totally believe that everybody ought to be in a public school, government run. And those of us who thought that that was a parental decision, and if parents wanted their child to be in a parochial religious school or a private academic-based school or homeschool, that was a parent's decision, not the government's decision. I was the first governor in the history of the country that appointed a homeschool parent to a State Board of Education. My very first appointee to the State Board of Education was a homeschool parent. It was unbelievably controversial. I had people who thought I'd turn the water off at every school district in the state. But here was my argument. If you want to continue to push toward regulating homeschools and homeschool parents, then you better give them a seat at the table to make sure you even understand what you're talking about. So it was, to me, highly justified. I would hope that the government would take care of its own business. It's got plenty of problems to fix in its own education system, that it really doesn't need to stick its snout into the homes of parents who choose to homeschool their kids, unless they're proving that they're delinquent or they're really not homeschool. But that's not a homeschool issue, that's a truancy issue, because that's what I used to hear. Well, you may have some parents and they're really not homeschooling, they're just keeping their kids out of school. Okay, don't blame homeschool for that. That's truancy, that's a parental issue, it's not a child issue. Great question, Stephanie, but bottom line, if you live in a state where you have a leftist governor, you better be prepared for the state trying to come and tell you how to homeschool your kids, what curriculum they have to have, what extracurricular activities they have to be engaged in, and even giving you restrictions on what you can teach your children in your own home. It's a scary thing, and it's why we cannot sit back and let it happen.
Jay Luther is saying, Governor, that 90% of the oil drilling in the United States is on private property, and Biden has nothing to do with it, 90%. Those numbers correct?
I don't know the figure. That sounds a little high, because a lot of the oil and gas has come out of federally leased lands, and especially all the offshore, of course.
Right.
That's not privately owned, that's all federal control. And we got a lot of oil and gas offshore. So I'd have to ask you to please send me the source for the 90% figure. I just don't believe that that's accurate. But let me say this, even if it were 100%, if the government makes it impossible to profit on the exploration, and there's enormous levels of upfront cost that may or may not be recovered. Because if you go and drill and you hit a dry hole and you don't hit oil or gas, you get nothing, but you've still spent the money. So this is why oil and gas companies have to have a long-term capacity to look at how much it's going to cost to explore, how many options they have to explore, and what is the likely return, which is very tough because they don't know what the cost is going to be in a year, 2 years. Heck, they don't know what the cost is going to be next month. So a lot of people talk about the just obscene profits of the oil and gas companies. My attitude is I hope they make good profits because I'd rather the money be made in America and spent by Americans on American things than made by some Saudi sheikh who hates us and who's not going to give us any of that money. So if somebody's going to make the money, let it be Americans. They may build a nice football stadium in your community. I'm pretty sure that you know, the folks over in the UAE will not be doing that in your town.
Thanks, Gov, for that. And a reminder to everybody that's watching this afternoon, don't forget to smash that like button because that way you'll always know when we are on doing this. And, of course, share with your friends because plenty of time for you to be participating this afternoon in our chat. Here's another one, Governor, from Janet Briley. This is a comment, really. Biden, Kamala, and Pelosi are not fit for our White House. Let's send them to China so they can be happy, which will make America a much happier place for all of us.
Oh, I guess Janet is saying we would be the happiest place on earth, like Disney used to pretend that they were going to be.
Absolutely.
How interesting. Thank you very much for the comment. It's a good one. We want to go to, this is a clip. In fact, I think we're kind of calling this segment Joe Biden and Kamala Harris fight to see who can make the most ridiculous statement possible for our live stream today. We're going to play both the Joe Biden clip and the Kamala Harris clip. I want you to listen to both of them very carefully. And if you understand what they're saying and what they're communicating, would you please put that in the chat and let us know? Because we've watched it over and again, and for the life of me, I have no idea what they're saying. Watch.
If we stand up to the bullies of the world, the autocrats and dictators, we stand up for those who are ready to unite with us, United States of America.
What was that? I mean, he started out talking about bullies, and then he ended up, it was like he took the plane off the runway and immediately nosedived it into the trees on the other side. I don't know where he went. But it gets worse, because one heartbeat away from the presidency is the vice president. And I want you to listen to her rhetoric, and notice she's reading from notes. Now, I can't believe this is a word-for-word script, because if it is, whoever wrote this should be fired. Maybe not fired, maybe put in front of a firing squad, for heaven's sakes. This is some of the worst prose I've ever heard. And she's reading something, and I don't know if she's reading the menu from Chili's or what she's reading, but for gosh sake, this makes no sense. Watch.
We also recognize, just as it has been in the United States for Jamaica, one of the issues that has been presented as an issue that is economic in the way of its impact has been the pandemic. So to that end, we are announcing today also that we will assist Jamaica in COVID recovery by assisting in terms of the recovery efforts in Jamaica that have been essential to, I believe, what is necessary to strengthen not only the issue of public health, but also the economy.
What?
If I watched that 20 more times, I still would not have a clue. Something about Jamaica and the pandemic and standing with, what was that?
Look it up in Webster's nonsense. That.
Yeah, you know, the term these days is called word salad. But, I mean, you could put vinegar and oil on it, and it's still inedible.
Yeah.
There's just nothing about that that makes any sense. I don't get it. So after seeing these two clips, why don't you let us know? Who do you think ought to get the crown this week for making the least sense? We'll put a poll in the chat for your answers. I think it'll be kind of fun.
Who do you think?
Hard to say. You know, it's almost like Tweedledee, Tweedledum. I don't know. But in a way, I'm going to say Kamala Harris makes the least sense. And the reason I say that is because she's got notes. And either she didn't know how to read them, if it was an outline, or if that was a transcript and she actually had a script in front of her, then all I can say for the country is, Joe, as much as I have anxiety about your presidency, for God's sake, pal, hang on till 2024, because I don't think we can handle Kamala Harris being in the seat of power,
yeah,
if that's the best she can do.
I'd have to go with Joe, though, because he pulls the words out of the air, which I guess is quite a talent. But anyway, that would be mine. So
well, at least you said he pulled them out of the air.
That's what I thought.
I'll leave it to our audience's imagination.
Thanks for that, Governor. All right, let's go down another path, shall we? Rumor going around about the future of Jen Psaki. Musical Mischief is asking, I've heard that Jen Psaki was leaving. Is that true or just a rumor?
I think she said when she started the job that she probably wouldn't be there more than about a year, so she's already outlasted that. And quite frankly, if she left, I'm not going to blame her for that. Having a daughter who had that job, there's probably not a more intense job in the White House, because everywhere the president goes, the press secretary has to go. Press secretary gets called all day, all night, through the night, not just by the president or White House staff or cabinet members, but also by reporters. So it's an incredibly intense thing. Most people intentionally don't stay in that job for long periods of time, especially if they've got a family. So frankly, if Jen Psaki left, I wouldn't read a whole lot into it other than she's following the same path that every press secretary has followed, and that is give it all you got as long as you can, and while your mind is still functional, get the heck out.
All right, so right now Larry Medley's saying too, vote every politician out of office every election. So we got some midterms coming up, so make a difference in that. Doug Betts is saying, what's more courageous, being LGBTQ or conservative? There's a powerful question.
It is a great question, and I think, quite frankly, these days it's far more courageous to be conservative, because the fact is you're flying against the headwinds in a big way. You know, if you come out and announce that you're all for the LGBTQIA whatever agenda, well, you're applauded and given standing ovations by all the elites. If you come out and say, I believe there are two genders, you get banned from Twitter and Facebook and YouTube. You're persona non grata. You may get fired from your job. You're told that you're going to lose tenure if you're a university professor. There are serious consequences for saying a simple thing that is biologically 100% accurate. There are two genders, and they're male and they're female. That's not just a scientific fact, it's a biblical fact. And people can say, well, I don't believe that. Fine. You don't have to believe in gravity either, but jump off the building and you're going to find out gravity still is a law. I'm not unsympathetic toward people who have gender dysphoria. I think that is real, and I think there are people who struggle. And I do think that there are people who are so convinced that they should be the other gender that I respect the fact that they are willing to go through intense hormone therapy, surgical procedure to become that person that they'd rather be. I just want to say, if they do that, that's an adult decision. That is not a decision that ought to be made by an 8 or 9 or 10 or even a 15-year-old. And I don't know if you heard, but just this week, in fact, today it was breaking, that the federal government is affirming transgender surgery for children. Now, this is genital mutilation and child abuse in a worse form. I'm just stunned that people think that, you know, even, let's take a person who's up to the age of 14 or 15. They're still a child. They don't get to buy liquor. They can't drive a car. They can't enlist in the military. They can't get married. They can't enter into contracts without someone signing for them, because we accept the fact that at that age, they are not emotionally and intellectually mature enough to make major decisions. We've always understood that. But then we say, you can't have a contract, buy a car, buy booze, but if you want to change your body through a surgical procedure, go ahead. It's irreversible. You can't undo it, but you can do that when you're a child. I think, folks, that's insane. I'm sorry if you think that, well, a child ought to be able to do what he wants. When has that ever made sense? Never.
Right. All right, so we do have a super chat, I guess a comment, Trudeau not interested in producing oil. This from Idgie Threadgood in California.
Now, and his point was that you said Trudeau is not...
Trudeau not interested in producing oil, her point, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Keep those comments coming to us. I want to show a couple of more clips. This is an interesting series. It shows that there is really an attempt on the part of the administration and the left to just say we don't need fossil fuels at all, which would be devastating to our economy and most likely to your lifestyle. This first one is from Bedingfield, again at the White House, filling in for Jen Psaki about the strategic oil release. Here we go.
What I would say about the long term, to your question about the long term, is, and I think you heard Brian articulate this really well, and of course the president spoke to it very powerfully today too, which is this ultimately shows that dependence on fossil fuels, dependence on foreign oil is not in the sustainable long-term best interest of the United States.
Actually, it is in the best interest of the United States because we have 400 or 500 years at current and projected use of oil and gas that would serve our energy needs. Surely somewhere in the next 400 or 500 years, maybe we'll develop alternatives. It may be a different kind of battery, may be a way to harness nuclear more efficiently. But for heaven's sakes, shouldn't we use what we have that's inexpensive so that we can run our economy and prosper Americans? And their attitude was that oil and gas and all fossil fuels should be eliminated. Do you think they even know what that means, that fossil fuels, that also, everything in this iPhone right here, almost maybe there are a few metal parts, but most all of this comes from fossil fuel.
Right.
I mean, do you think of all the furniture, the clothing, everything we have, that all the synthetics, most people don't understand. Most of the clothing that people wear is synthetic. That means it comes from an oil derivative.
That's right.
They're going to go naked? They're going to grow more cotton?
Please, no.
I don't know. I mean, it's insanity, total insanity. Second one, this is Jennifer Granholm, Energy Secretary. And she once again follows the same line that we have a much more efficient way. Just go buy an electric car.
We have got to use this reason to become energy independent with clean energy. We don't want to be relying upon the fossil fuel markets that are incredibly volatile or from countries that don't have our interests at heart. So ultimately, the best solution is to go clean.
Well, there are clean ways to get oil and gas out of the ground that are as clean as getting lithium out of the ground to make the batteries for your electric car. Where does she think that comes from?
Right.
Lithium is not, you just don't reach up in the sky and pull it. You got to mine it, and that's a dirty industry. They never tell you that. I don't understand how people are falling for this stuff. It's totally crazy. Clean energy, as if it's some, manna from God's heaven. It is not. Nancy Pelosi, of course, she gets into it. Watch, don't just listen to her, but watch. I think if you tied her hands to her side, she wouldn't be able to talk. Let's watch.
But we cannot allow the fossil fuel industry to use this as an excuse to reverse everything we're doing to save the planet. One of the things I think that the president may say, I don't have this as a fact, is that we will use the Defense Production Act to speed up diversification so that we're not so dependent on oil.
Leonard Bernstein, when directing an orchestra, didn't use that many gestures. It's crazy to watch when she talks, and she's always given us this. But the thing that I just find beyond crazy is when she speaks as if we're going to be able to have all of our energy needs met by throwing away the single most successful American industry on the planet, the oil and gas. But we're going to do it in the name of saving the planet. Now, while we're saving the planet, you know who doesn't give a rip about all that? China, India, most of Europe. So what are they going to do? They're going to use fossil fuels. And we're going to be over here paying $16 a gallon for gas. and buying it from people who hate our guts and turn around and take the profits and shoot at us. This is insanity plus.
Yeah. Well, have to say, one more super chat may wrap up with this today. We still have Guantanamo Bay, right? Let's make use of it. Head down to Miami, Dems, and Trump Cruise Line straight to the beautiful Cuban Bay. So there you go.
I kind of like that. By the way, I've been to Guantanamo. The prison that we built down there that is not being used very much ought to be. It is the most magnificent prison I've ever seen. And my prison director in Arkansas and I went down there because the federal government wanted some governors and prison people to see what they had built and kind of get an assessment because they were being accused of operating this very horrible place. And we went there and looked at each other, and I remember saying, I pray none of our inmates ever see this place, because they'll all be begging to commit some kind of major federal terrorist crime to be able to get down here. It was the most elaborate, well-equipped place that I've ever seen in my life, and I thought, you know, I don't want to spend a night in prison, but there are worse places to go than this one, that's for sure. Hey, we want to say thanks so much for joining us, and I hope you'll continue to leave your questions in the comments section. Did we mention that you need to subscribe to the channel? I think maybe we did, but if not, let me say it again. Hit the notification bell. As always, we thank you so much for joining us. But don't forget, we have a show coming up this weekend. That's what we're working on today. And I know you're going to want to watch it, and here's why.
This week on Huckabee, former State Department spokesperson Morgan Ortagus. News with a twist on In Case You Missed It.
You know what would improve CNN's ratings? Kickable TV screen.
Dwayne Perkins' hilarious stand-up comedy. Missy Robertson celebrates adoption. And award-winning musician Brandon Heath. Watch Huckabee on Saturday at 8, 7 Central, and again on Sunday at 9, 8 Central, right here on TBN.